Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, Senior Writing Coach with Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 27, Keeping Up with the Scholarly Literature, Part 2, Skim versus Deep Reading. This week, we're going to talk about the types of reading that you're doing when you're keeping up with your scholarly literature. If you didn't catch our episode last week, we focused on having a system for making sure you have regular contact with the new literature that's emerging in your field. And so I would encourage you to check that episode out for some strategies there. But last week, I mentioned a technology tool called Scholarcy, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in detail today. But I would encourage you to check out that past episode to see some different reasons why you might want Scholarcy or another tech tool as part of your system for keeping up with scholarly literature. So let's go ahead and start talking about skim versus deep reading. Like last week, I am going to show a few screenshots, but we'll put pictures in the show notes. And of course, anybody that's just listening on audio, I'll describe what it is that we're doing. So hopefully you'll be able to catch up with that. Right now, I'm sharing a screen, so those of you on YouTube can see what it is that we're looking at today. And again, it's just some screenshots just to show you in more detail how we might want to use it. Okay, so if we're talking about skim reading, one of the things that I think about when I do skim reading versus deep reading is that skim reading for me is a yes or no question. It is, do I want this source, yes or no? It could be, because I always have graduate students say, well, what about maybe? I don't know if I want it yet. I always tell them, if you're not sure, take it as a yes. Yes, I want this. I'm not sure where I'm going to put it, or I'm not sure if it's just going to be maybe a parenthetical reference somewhere. It might be something very tangential. It might be for a future project, but yes. No is a lot easier because a lot of times when we're looking for scholarly literature, we can figure out, I don't want that source. I either already have it, it's too old, it's not in my discipline, it's not relevant to the topic I'm talking about. So you can tell with a lot of sources you don't want them, right? So we know, when we're doing some searching. If you're not sure, yes could be your answer. And then the second question I look at when I'm doing some skim reading. So I'm just, I found a source, it looks kind of interesting. I'm just trying to decide if I want it or not. What I try to do next is to ask myself this. I try to figure out, does this source complicate, support, or refute my argument for whatever project I'm working on that I might want this source for? And why I'm asking those questions is I'm trying to decide why I need the source. I might need it because that person has raised a really interesting point that I did not address in my own research, but I think it's relevant to bring to the table. So I've got to work that source in to figure out what my connection is between their argument and mine. Another thing is that they made a really good counter argument, or they've proven something that my research shows the opposite of, or it's just another great piece of support. So I try to figure out when I'm doing skim reading why I want the source. And last week in the episode, I talked about how to do a system for finding these sources. So this week's episode is focusing on what to do once you get that source. So one of the things that I will do once I actually have the source is I've really started using a tool called Scholarcy. I mentioned it last week, but also in the episode about trying technology tools. And why I like this particular tool, and I'm going to walk through how I'm using it, is that it makes these very quick flashcards of points about a source. And it lets me look at a source more closely, but in a very time-efficient way. So let me show you what that looks like. Scholarcy, if you go to Scholarcy, you can click a green button on it and upload a research article. So this does mean one of the things that you'll want to do is either put the URL, capture the URL for your article. You can post that in a little box, or just upload the article and click the green button. Either way will work. In this case, I just uploaded my article for the example I'm showing. So I basically downloaded a PDF out of a scholarly database, threw it up on my desktop for a second, and then I'm uploading it. The next thing that will happen is on the right-hand side of Scholarcy. So the left side is all a button to upload it or upload the link so that it can search through that. on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a button that says Expand All. And what it does is once you have uploaded your paper and you click the Expand All button, you will get these little flashcards. And what I'm showing on the next screen is what happens. And there's different flashcards that you can see. So one of the flashcards that pops up is something that is brand new for Scholarcy, even something that I didn't talk about weeks ago, but it is a flashcard about comparative analysis. So this is really, it's in the beta version, but it is a very cool feature of this, because what it does is it connects the article's methods against other studies that are out there in the field, and it does some highlighting. So what you're looking at on the on the screen is some little snippets from the article with some highlights to compare the claims made with other sources. And the other sources in there are hyperlinked. So you can actually then go click on those other sources and check those out. So very time efficient. The other thing I like about it is that it labels where in the article that happened. So in this case, it has some highlights from the introduction. So that way I know, oh, this piece of research or this comparison of methods is happening right there in the introduction. So they're laying the groundwork. Maybe later I'll see it's in a methodology section, and what they're doing is talking about how they tweaked a research method for their own purposes. And all that kind of stuff is stuff you can pick up on more of a deep read, but I think Scholarcy does a pretty good job of just capturing that at a glance for you to decide if you want this or not. So in another example, I mentioned in a few episodes ago, I've been doing a lot of use with time use diary research. Something like this would be very helpful for me because there's different ways to use time use diary research, and I'm only looking at a certain way to do it. So there's other kinds of time use diaries I'm not interested in that I might not pick up on a skim read if I just really quickly went through the article. But in Scholarcy, I'd be able to see right away, oh, I want that. No, I don't want that. Because I could tell from some of the citations that those are about different methods that I don't want. Another thing that is useful is that one of the flashcards, so what I'm showing on the screen is a little purple tab at the top. The purple tabs are all the flashcards, is what they call Scholarcy highlights. And this is just bullet points from the article that capture different parts of the argument and how the argument builds. So one of the things I like about this is that they break up the information in very small chunks. So I'm a pretty fast skim reader when I read a scholarly journal article, just a print article or on screen, that I could do this without having these bullet points. But if you are a slow reader, and many of us are, these bullet points are great because what it does is it chunks the information for you in a way that might be more reader friendly and more visually friendly. So it's easier on the eyes, it's faster to work through. I could even see this if you are a very busy faculty member where you're trying to do a little scholarly reading between class. You can have this flashcard up, just read a couple of the points before you go to your next class. And it's very digestible, small chunks. So I really like that aspect of it. Another thing that's great about it is that it has references. There's a references flashcard. And what the references spot does is it has all kinds of little links to Google Scholar. You can look at databases. There's little icons to click on to take you to those references if you want to check out the references that are listed. So in this case, I looked at a scholarly article and I saw one reference that I was like, ooh, I really want that. I want that article. So in that case, I can actually go to it. I can click on there's a little purple tab for Scholarcy. I can click on that, and what happens is it opens up the highlights from that article. So I have that on the screen, but it's kind of great because if you're getting in that rabbit hole of research we talked about last week where one source leads to another, at least here it's very condensed where you can again skim the little chunks, decide if you want it, and then if you don't, move on, or if you do, then you can capture it. And last week I talked about how to capture the stuff that you find during a skip read. So I really like this tool. I think it's a great resource. You can check it out. There's paid options. There's ways to try it for free. I will put a link in the show notes to it, but I think it does a pretty good job, and I have not found something like it that allows this very fast kind of skim reading experience. So this is a way that you might go about doing that. For deep reading, I wanted to talk about the difference and how I might go about doing some deep reading. So with skim reading, we mentioned it's very efficient. Do I want it? Yes or no. Last week I talked about if I do want it, how do I capture it and put it in my writing? But deep reading is a whole other animal. So I want to talk about some systems that might work for you for deep reading. One of the things that I would do is just think about these 3 questions. So when are you doing it? Where are you doing it? And then how are you taking notes on that deep reading? Because the capture in this, when you're trying to take something from your deep reading into your writing, is a little bit different. So here's what I do. I have kind of I don't know, it's a sort of an old school system for this, but here's the thing. With deep reading, I do this. I always have one scholarly book in my discipline I'm reading at one time. I was doing like 3 or 4 at a time, once I had a little bit more time as a graduate student. But right now I'm reading just one scholarly book at a time. I have a very old school system where I have usually a small, and I can actually show a picture of it, a small yellow, very small yellow tablet, a thin tablet that I actually slide inside the scholarly book because I've bought the book. I don't care if I break the spine. But what I'll do is I'll actually stick that little notepad inside a scholarly book. So I'll write inside the book, but I'll also do some drafting and connecting that deep reading to my own writing on that yellow pad of paper. So I like to do that because sometimes it's a way to brainstorm. Sometimes I'll write back to the book and write little notes in the margins. But I like the yellow pad of paper inside the book just for this one reason, that I'm able to take like notes from different page numbers and write some connections on there, and I can find it more easily. I can just grab out this little yellow pad of paper out of the book and get my notes right away. I don't have to think, oh, was that on page 75 that I wrote that little note, or did I draw that graph on page 144? The yellow pad is a way that I've got a space to write notes, take notes in a spot. Yellow pads are very cheap. You can throw them in for different books. And I just like it because I think it's a nice portable system. I also keep a pen in there. So yes, I know I mentioned I don't care if I break the spine because I've bought the scholarly book. Of course, if you're using a library book, I would pick like Post-its or something that's a little bit maybe more friendly. Tabs also work well if you're somebody that really likes using those colored tabs that stick out. I think that's great. But one of the things that I would always encourage with deep reading with a book specifically is always writing back to that content that you find, rather than just underlining. So, probably back in the day when we were undergraduate students, we did some highlighting and things like that. I'm really a strong believer in connecting the reading and the writing process where you're actually writing comments, asking questions, maybe writing out how your argument compares to what you found in that. And I think one of the reasons that helps is that, of course, it solidifies that reading content with you a little bit more as we're taking in more and more knowledge. But the other part of it is that those little pieces of writing, even those little bits where you argue back against a claim made on a page or on those notes, you can then take those notes and put them into the writing project you're doing the deep reading for, assuming you're going to use that deep writing for a scholarly project. If you're using it for, say, a class or something else, maybe you don't need to have quite as much of a system. But even deep scholarly books that I'm reading to support a class I'm teaching, I will still have one of those little small yellow, very small notepads inside the book because I'll make teaching notes on there. How am I going to use this book? Where are the assignments that I'm going to use with that? So that's books. The other thing that I do is at any given time, I always have a manila folder, plain old manila folder. There's a picture of it on the screen, just one of those file folders, the ones you can buy in bulk for like 500 of them. I will have one of those for each of the writing projects that I'm working on. And I still like to print out articles and read them. I'm just not a big screen reader. So you could replicate this electronically for sure. Certainly when you're storing things to read. But for me, I like having the physical folder, the printouts of the articles for the project. And those are articles I want to do a little bit more deep reading because I know I'm going to need to rely on them more heavily. And why I like the manila folder is that I can take notes on the inside of the folder about the articles that I found. I can also write on the articles themselves. But I also like it, and this is, again, getting back to academic parents that we have out there, or folks that don't have a whole lot of time where you're by a screen, or if you're in the car all the time. I like this because it's very portable for me, that say when I'm waiting 20 minutes to pick up one of my children from a practice, or I'm, waiting to get my oil changed or something in one of those drive-through places, I can sit there, read articles, knock out articles, take some notes, and have them. And I like the physical bundle of having the articles for a particular project. So one of the reasons I like the manila folder system is that I have a different folder for each project. And I've mentioned in other podcast episodes, I'm sure, plus on some of the other research that I'm working on, that juggling multiple writing projects is just a fact of academic life. So for me to have a couple of folders of articles, I might keep one, whatever my priority project is at one time. I'm just going to keep that one folder with me, but I've got maybe a couple other folders starting to build up as I find things for other projects. And when I need them, I will grab that folder and use it. If you're going to replicate this in electronic experience, so if you're going to put this on like, say your Fire tablet or something like this, I would do the same thing. I would have a folder on your screen. I would have that. I would load in your electronic articles and then have them in a portable way. So I do have a Fire tablet and I could replicate this, but I know for me, I like having it here in this manila folder just because of the ability to take notes. Although in many reading programs, you can actually like highlight and take notes on those. So if that works for you electronically, I think that's another great system. So hopefully this week you found these tips helpful, and I'm happy to share more with you about reading practices in the future. But we will have some screenshots and links to these tools, including Scholarcy, in the show notes. And I'm hoping this helps with some summer reading that you might be doing. Happy writing.